primary objective here is to help you develop a firm understanding of some basic facts and truly valid scientific principles of exercise and nutrition so that you can learn to think more clearly, more logically about those subjects for yourself, guide your own efforts more successfully, of course, with a greater degree of confidence and certainty about what you're doing, and that's a real important issue with me, by the way. And so you won't have to continue to rely on, if you have been, the contradictory misinformation published in the muscle rags. That being stated, let me start officially. I call my approach to bodybuilding a rational approach, a logical, scientific, reality-based approach. The basis of a rational approach to bodybuilding and life in general, in fact, is the recognition that only the specific, appropriate knowledge can lead one to engage in the purposeful action required to successfully achieve a goal. Keep in mind that muscle magazines are not sacred scripture. They're not even science journals. They're muscle magazines. And what I'm going to present to you today is the specific, appropriate knowledge necessary for you to achieve your goal. Man, the human being, is not a cat, a dog, a bird, a horse. We are not instinctual creatures whose knowledge is hardwired into the nervous system. There is no instinctive principle to guide us in our training efforts, in other words, as many people seem to believe. A number of years ago, an old friend of mine joked about that idea. He said if we followed our instincts, we would defecate or urinate in a barbell. We sure wouldn't lift one. We are not instinctual creatures. We have to gain our knowledge through a voluntary mental effort, i.e., we have to choose to think to gain knowledge, and because most people don't know how to think, they make wrong choices in their thought processes. They don't know how to distinguish truth from falsehood. In fact, the entire world, including the world of bodybuilding, is literally awash in a sea of false ideas. This does not mean, however, that valid knowledge doesn't exist. It most certainly does. My favorite analogy or example here is with NASA, the Space Administration. Why have they been so spectacularly successful in sending men to the moon and in bringing them back safely each time? Not because they just kind of sort of know what they're doing. They have a firm intellectual grasp and understanding of the one and only possible valid theory of space travel. They have the specific appropriate knowledge necessary, and as a result, they've succeeded with each one of their man-moon missions. I tell my clients, and I'm telling you here today, you should view each one of your workouts literally as a sort of mission. And like NASA with theirs, you should fully expect to succeed with each one. Imagine we're down there in Houston at headquarters control NASA before a man-moon launch, and the director is sitting there wringing his hands, crying out, "Oh, gee, I hope we make it this time." Of course they don't. They are supremely confident. They have little doubt that they're going to succeed because they have the specific, appropriate knowledge. Theirs is a rational approach based on an understanding of logic and science and all the things that help make Western civilization possible. I emphasize this part because many bodybuilders find it impossible to believe or difficult to believe that they're going to succeed with each and every one of their workouts. So I take the time and point out, now look, if NASA can succeed with every one of their man-moon missions, let's face it, an enormously complex goal requiring abstract theoretical knowledge from physics, electronics, astronomy, engineering, mathematics, you mean to tell me we can't succeed with each one of our missions to the gym here on Earth? And they present it in that kind of a scientific context. They see my point. Central to this rational or enlightened approach to bodybuilding is an understanding, in fact, that there is a relationship between science and human progress. Why is life today in the 1990s so much better in so many ways than it was 50, 100, or 500 years ago? Largely because of the advances of science. The purpose of science is to identify the facts of reality. From those facts derive a theory whose principles serve as a guide for successful human action. When you're doing this thing properly, once you understand the theory of high-intensity training and learn to implement the principles properly, you'll see progress, not unpredictably in tiny dribbles every now and then, but every workout. I don't say that blindly or as a zealot. It's because I understand that that theory is a valid theory. And the purpose of a scientific theory, again, is to serve as a guide for successful human action. You should not waste even 1 week with non-productive training. You literally should not, because we're not in the dark ages on this. There's no mystery here. There are reasons why muscles grow. There is a science of productive bodybuilding exercise, and I happen to know what it is with a high degree of certainty. You should not waste even 1 week with non-productive training. In order for you to know that you're not wasting your time, in order for you to know that your workouts are successful, you will need, of course, a reliable or rational standard to gauge or evaluate each and every one of your workout efforts. Most bodybuilders use the wrong standard for evaluating their workout-to-workout progress. I emphasize workout-to-workout progress. The standard they use is body weight increases. I know of bodybuilders, I was myself a bodybuilder who did this. I know bodybuilders who every time they walk into the gym, the first thing they do is step on the scale. If they're not gaining weight every workout or every week, then they suspect something is wrong, and in most cases something is wrong, but it's not necessarily the fact that they're not gaining weight. Don't evaluate your workout-to-workout progress by the standard of body weight increases, because muscle growth on a daily basis, even at best, is negligible. Even at best is negligible. Let's take a best-case scenario. Let's say you've had the required genetics, first of all. You were going to train properly in the course of the next year, eat adequately, and gain 30 pounds of muscle. Certainly a best-case scenario. As great as that is, 30 pounds of muscle in 1 year only averages out to literally slightly over 1 ounce a day, which is not enough to register on your typical body weight scale every day or even every week. There are 16 ounces in a pound, of course. If you gain 1 ounce a day, you gain a pound every 2.5 weeks or so. And if on that given day you got a haircut and had diarrhea, you would register a weight loss. Do you see why we should not be using body weight increases as your standard for evaluating workout-to-workout progress? Ultimately, of course, most bodybuilders want to gain weight. Ultimately, but the point I'm making here is workout to workout, you want to know that you're on the right track so that you ultimately do gain muscle. Noticeable body weight increases and muscle mass increases. You cannot use body weight increases as your standard, obviously, because muscle growth on a daily basis, even at best, is negligible. The appropriate standard to use for evaluating bodybuilding progress is strength increases. When you're training properly, you'll be going up in reps, in weight, or both, every set of every exercise, or damn near. I have had clients that have gone up on every set of every workout for many, many months. I've had other clients do almost that well, but all of my clients, every one of them makes regular, continual progress, without a doubt. Most bodybuilders don't know this, but in fact a properly conducted bodybuilding program is essentially a strength training program. What I want you to get out of this part here is that you'll be training workout to workout for strength increases and evaluating your progress in terms of strength increases. Train for strength and evaluate your progress in terms of strength increases. Why do we use strength increases, in fact, as a standard for evaluating bodybuilding progress, you might be wondering? Because there is a relationship between muscular strength and muscular size. If you want to get bigger, in other words, you've got to get stronger. If you want to get bigger, you've got to get stronger. I emphasize that one because there's a reluctance on the part of most bodybuilders to accept that idea. If you want to get bigger, you've got to get stronger. Just the other day in Gold's Gym, a young man was arguing with me about that quite vehemently and at some length. I finally stopped him and asked, what are you supposed to do to get bigger? Get weaker? And he kind of giggled. Furthermore, I said, if there was no relationship between strength and muscular size, it would be conceivable, if there was literally no relationship at all, it would be conceivable that people like Dorian Yates could only curl 50 pounds. When in fact he curls over 200 pounds. He got as big as he did in part because he got as strong as he did. If you want to get bigger, you've got to get stronger. Now, while all that is true, beyond any shadow of a doubt, it's also true, and this is an important follow-up statement, it's also true that for most people, strength increases precede size increases. Most people get stronger for a while without getting bigger. But as long as an individual continues to get stronger, he'll eventually get bigger. Now, just how strong he gets, how long it takes, I can't say, because those are matters dictated by genetics. But as long as you're getting stronger, you know you're on the right track. That's true for most people, by the way. I was one of those individuals myself. I can remember in the early part of my training career especially, there would be periods of even as long as 4 months. I remember this very clearly. There were periods of months during which I would get stronger on a regular basis and not gain any weight. As a result, I grew enormously frustrated and almost gave up more times than I cared to remember. When I say frustrated, I mean painfully, agonizingly frustrated. It was only years later that Arthur Jones pointed this out, and I saw it was true in so many cases, that for most people, strength comes first. I'm emphasizing it to you here today so that you can avoid my frustration. I don't want you calling me back in 2 months, in other words, reporting gleefully how much your strength went up. Geez, Mike, I went up 80 pounds on my squats, 120 pounds on my shrugs, but I only gained 3 pounds. That wouldn't be bad. If you were to gain 3 pounds every 2 months, of course, by the end of the year, you'd end up having gained 18 pounds, which ain't bad. Some people wonder just how much muscle that is. Take a moment and visualize sitting in front of you on your dinner table a single individual 1-pound beefsteak. Now imagine 18 of them. That would probably be enough to cover your dinner table almost. If you were to sustain that rate of growth for 2 years, of course, you'd end up gaining 36 pounds of muscle. Imagine 36 individual 1-pound beefsteaks on your dinner table. I'm pointing all this out to you today to help you gain a rational perspective on what you can reasonably hope to achieve with this and thus avoid frustration. Frustration is often the greatest hindrance to bodybuilding progress. And of course, part of the reason for frustration is ignorance. There is a proper rational perspective within which to view this. You're not going to gain 5 pounds of muscle a week, in other words. There may be those weeks, in fact, when you do gain 5 pounds, which is the way I gained. I would go for several months without gaining any weight, then all of a sudden, voila, I stepped on the scale and I'm 5 pounds heavier. Let me now move into what I refer to as the more theoretical portion. Most bodybuilders make the grave mistake of approaching the subject of bodybuilding training with the idea that all training theories have some merit. Then they waste precious time frantically trying one after the other in the hope that someday they'll find something that works. And because most bodybuilders use that approach, they fail to achieve their goals, and that's true. More bodybuilders fail to achieve their goals than succeed because of this irrational approach. They don't understand that there does exist specific appropriate knowledge in every field of endeavor to achieve a goal. Not understanding that, they accept blindly and uncritically all these different training theories, trying one after the other, again hoping that someday they'll find one that works. It could not possibly be true that all, or many, or even 2 training theories have equal merit. There is and can be only one valid scientific theory of anything, like medicine, astronomy, physics, electronics, mathematics. Likewise, there is and can be only one valid theory of productive bodybuilding exercise, and I'm convinced that it's the theory of high-intensity training. However, I don't expect, nor do I want any of my clients necessarily to accept my conclusion based on my certainty, but I do like them to listen to the reasons why I'm certain, then arrive at their own conclusion. And that's what this next portion is going to be about in part. If you were going to set out from Orange County to New York by automobile, you're going to take a trip by car, you would consult a map. A map, interestingly enough, is a type of a theory. It's a theory about how to get from one place to another. If you were to start out from Orange County to New York without a map, of course, after a short period, you'd get lost. As a result of being lost, you would lose your motivation, then try to find your way back home. A bodybuilding theory, if it's a true, valid, correct theory, will serve you successfully as a map on your journey towards the development or acquisition of a more muscular physique. But you want to know, before you get started, that your map is a true map. You don't want to start out from Orange County and end up in Alaska and then in Atlanta, Georgia. You want to go to New York without all the detours. You want to achieve your goal in the most productive, efficient manner imaginable. Before you could ever come to critically analyze these different theories out there, Weider has one, Cybergenics has one, John Perillo has one, Brad Jeffries has one, I have one. You have to know what a theory is. A theory is a set of principles which claims to be either a correct description of some aspect of reality and or a guide for successful human action. What I want you to remember here primarily is that a theory is a set of principles. The theory of high-intensity training, like any other theory, has to have a beginning, a starting point, a first principle. In formulating a first principle of a bodybuilding theory, the first principle would be a primary. We have to answer the question, what is it we're seeking to achieve with this activity? And of course the answer obviously is grow muscle. What is it, in other words? What element, what factor, what feature pertaining to the workout itself is responsible for triggering the growth process in human beings? This is the primary because this is what we're seeking to achieve. Until you identify what the stimulus is, you can't determine how much of it and how often you need it. See my point? As far as I've been able to ascertain, there is no one else out there advocating a theory, neither Weider, nor Perillo, nor Cybergenics, nor anyone else who has even identified formally a first principle. Now remember, a theory is a set of principles. If you ain't got a first principle, man, then you ain't got a theory. As far as I've been able to determine, the only theory that exists, qua theory, in fact, is the theory of high-intensity training. It is a set of non-contradictory abstract principles which serves as a correct description of some aspect of reality. The first principle of the theory of high-intensity training is, in fact, based on an identification of the specific stimulus responsible for flipping on the growth machinery inside human beings. It was discovered a long time ago that specific stimulus is related to the intensity of the effort, i.e., the closer that the intensity of the effort gets to 100%, the greater the likelihood that growth will be stimulated. Now, just as I said a minute ago, there is and can be only one valid theory of anything. It's also true, of course, there could only be one correct, valid definition of any concept like intensity. Something I learned a while back studying philosophy and logic is that a precondition of rational thinking is that you attach clear, specific meanings to words. When we think using concepts to words. If you don't know the precise meaning of the key concepts involved in your thought patterns, then you ain't thinking clearly. Let me give you the correct definition of this one word at least, so that you can learn to think more clearly about the subject of exercise for yourself. Intensity refers to the percentage of possible, momentary, muscular effort being exerted. Intensity refers to the percentage of possible, momentary, muscular effort being exerted. Now, to make that abstract idea more concretely clear, let me go to a concrete example. In fact, let's say you could curl 100 pounds for 10 reps. And no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't curl 100 pounds for 11. That 10th rep is your last possible rep. Now, the first rep of that set, of course, would be very easy. It would be the easiest, in fact, of all the reps of the set. Of all the reps of the set, in other words, the first rep would require the least percentage of your possible momentary muscular effort, the least intensity of effort. The first repetition fatigues you a little bit, of course, and therefore the second rep would require a greater effort. Whereas the first rep may require 8 to 12% intensity of effort, 8 to 12% of your possible momentary muscular effort, the second rep may require on the order of 20%. The third rep fatigues you, or the second rep fatigues you even more, and the third rep will be experienced by you as harder still. And so it goes with each successive rep of the set. Each one is harder than the last. Each one requires a higher percentage of your possible momentary muscular effort than did the preceding, until finally we get to that last rep, the 10th one, where you're trying as hard as you can. That last rep is very special in that it's the only rep of the set that requires 100% intensity of effort, 100% of your possible momentary muscular ability. Now let me ask you a question. Which rep do you think would be more productive in terms of stimulating growth? The last rep, which is the hardest, or the first rep, which is the easiest? The last. If it was the first rep, then why do the last 9? Don't you think it stands to reason that the last rep would also be better than the second and the third? That last rep is, in fact, the stimulus, the trigger that sets the growth process into motion. Not the first rep. That's too easy. Bodybuilding is about effort. That's why we have adjustable barbell, so we can adjust the effort required and build strength and size. That last rep is very special. It's the only rep that requires 100% intensity of effort. Obviously, the last rep would be better than the first rep and also every other rep. So if you don't do that last rep, do you see where you're shortchanging yourself? That repetition, once again, is the only one that requires 100% intensity of effort. Now you see where the theory gets its name. That last rep is literally a trigger. There is something that goes on physiologically during that last rep which is responsible for flipping on the growth machinery inside the muscle cell. If you don't do that last rep, then you don't achieve maximum growth stimulation. And by the way, you can't make up for not doing it by doing several more haphazard sets. Either you trigger the growth process into motion, or you don't. It's that last rep, that's the trigger. If you don't do it, you can't make up for it by doing 3 or 4 or 20 more sets like that. Let me now give you quickly a formal statement of the first principle in case you want to study this later and think about it more for yourself. In order to stimulate an optimal increase in muscular strength or size, a set of an exercise must be carried to a point of momentary muscular failure, i.e. the exercise must be intense to stimulate growth. Now that you have that first principle, a question logically arises here. Okay, Mike Mentzer, you might be thinking to yourself, you did that pretty good, but going through that set and pointing out what intensity is in terms of percentage of effort, that last rep obviously would be the most productive. Now I want to know, Mike Mentzer, now that I have this first principle, I want to know exactly how many of those sets I should do for best results, and that is the correct question to ask here. Understand that science itself is an exact and exacting discipline. A proper science of bodybuilding, therefore, should tell you exactly how many sets to do. The Muscle Magazine people, of course, continue to advocate everybody do 12 to 20. That's not very exact. Is it 12 or is it 20? And if it's 12, who in the hell wants to do 20? And if more is really better, as they imply, then why not do 200 sets? Why stop at 20? Where did they ever get the number 20 anyway? It's literally arbitrary. Remember, science is an exacting discipline. There's no room for the arbitrary in science. Let me give you an example here. Let's go back to my favorite people, NASA Headquarters Control, right before a manned moon launch. The director yells down to the end of the control module, "Hey, Fred, why don't you try throwing a blue switch this time instead of a red one? Let's see what happens." Not very likely they would succeed with their manned moon missions. Perhaps a more apt analogy here would be with medical science. If you were going to go into surgery tomorrow, very much want your anesthesiologist to give you the precise amount of anesthesia required. Any more than that, you could grow toxic and die. Take that same principle from medical science and apply it to exercise science. In both cases, we're dealing with a science, and in both cases, we're dealing with the human body. In the first case, the anesthesiologist is looking to infuse, the word is infuse, the human body with the precise amount of anesthesia required. In the second case, exercise science, we're looking to not infuse, but impose upon the body the requisite training stimulus and the proper, precise amount of exercise required. Even one set more than is required is overtraining. One of my favorite analogies here is with and getting a suntan. You'll get a suntan every time you go out into the intense August sun, so long as you don't overexpose yourself. What happens when you expose your skin to even 1 minute more high-intensity ultraviolet sunlight in August than is required to get a suntan? You burn. That's all it takes. 1 extra minute, 1 minute in the sunlight, which is required minimally to get a suntan. You go into the negative, a sunburn. 1 set more even 1 set more than is minimally required to build up your muscles, you go into the negative, you lose muscle. Instead of overcompensating the body building something up, in the first case a suntan, melanin, the second case muscle tissue, the body goes into the negative towards decompensation. It loses skin, the skin burns, or in the second case you get weaker and smaller. Overtraining is not just something kind of negative. It's the single worst training mistake you can make. It is that precisely which militates against your achieving the desired result. And of course, the greater the overtraining, the more dire the consequences. It's possible to drive yourself into an overtraining situation so deep that it takes months to overcome. If you were to, in fact, get a sunburn, you wouldn't keep going out into the sun, would you? Because the sunburn would keep getting worse, would it not? Now, we don't have quite clear an alarm signal when we're overtraining in bodybuilding. I know of people who overtrain every day for months. They know nothing about this stuff. What they do amounts, in essence, to running to the newsstands each month, grabbing up a bundle of muscle magazines, running home, riffling through the pages at random, grabbing a program, let's say it's Gary Stridham's. Then they go into the gym and slavishly adhere to it for months and even years, during which time, of course, they make no progress, or very, very, very little, end up concluding, erroneously in many cases, that they have terrible genetics, they're hard gainers or no gainers, and they give up training entirely or continue going to the gym merely as a social function, a social ritual. In many of these cases, the individuals have great genetics. The point I'm making here is that without the proper methodology, you could literally have Mr. Olympia genetics and not know it. If a surgeon doesn't master the principles of surgery, he's not going to be as successful a surgeon as the guy who got all A's and was very disciplined and mastered the principles of surgery. What we need here is the specific, appropriate knowledge to achieve our goals. That man needs a method of cognition. Just as there are principles that guide us in training, there are principles that should guide us in our thinking. In fact, we wouldn't have any principles at all if it wasn't for Aristotle. He discovered the principles of thinking, those laws of logic. I made the point along the way a couple of times that if you think I'm sounding too professorial, people, or too intellectual, then you've got my best wishes, because this is what human life is about. Knowledge, learning how to think and use it. What we're looking for here is the precise, the least amount of exercise required. The logical place to start, even if you're skeptical, is with the least amount possible. The logical place to start is not with an arbitrary number like 20, but with the least amount possible. In other words, if one set doesn't work, you can't go any lower to find the least amount necessary. You can't do 0 sets and have a workout. If one set doesn't work, you could always go to 2. But I can save you the time and the headache. I've already worked it out. I've trained over 400 people, closer to 500 people now over the last 4.5 years. 1 set per exercise and never more than 2 sets per muscle is all that's needed. That's just the way it is. And if you're incredulous, you're skeptical, the reason for that is that you still have operative in your subconscious the childlike logic that more is better. In some cases, of course, that's true. More money is better than less. You can't take that principle and blindly apply it to exercise and expect to get anything out of it. 1 set per exercise, never more than 2 sets per muscle. Even if you're skeptical, that's the logical place to start. If you start out with 20 sets and that doesn't work, you're lost. Where do you go? Up to 21 or down to 19? If 1 set doesn't work, you can only go in the upward direction, and very methodically. You wouldn't go from 1 set to 15. We're looking for precision, the specific appropriate knowledge necessary. Okay, let me now give you quickly a formal statement of the second principle. In order to be productive, intense exercise must be brief. In order to be productive, intense exercise must be brief. Now that you've got the first 2 principles, another question comes up. Okay, Mike Mentzer, you did that one pretty good too. Hearing this in a broader context, I see what you're doing here in developing this theory. You're identifying the stimulus, and then you're finding out how much of it we need. Just like with anesthesia medical science, they had to do a lot of research to come up with the chemical compounds that would be effective as anesthesia. Then they had to discover the proper dose levels. They used animals to do it. We're not quite as formally disciplined here in bodybuilding. We don't have universities. In fact, the university exercise physiology departments, from what I'm able to gather, are garbage. They're still teaching everybody to do 3 sets of 10 reps, which is ridiculous. Where'd the number 3 come from? It's arbitrary again. There's 3 stooges. There's the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. There's 3 square meals a day. Some people even believe in triangle or pyramid power. They don't realize that they're violating a very important principle of science. There's no room in science for the arbitrary. For some people, 3 sets of 10 reps is gross overtraining. Just as there are those individuals that don't tolerate exposure to high-intensity sunlight stress as well as others, there are some individuals who don't tolerate, of course, high-intensity exercise stress as well as others. For an exercise physiologist to tell everybody to do the exact same program is an admission of his ignorance about very essential and actually simple points of genetics and the body's response to stress. Now that you have the first 2 principles, now that you understand that exercise must be intense and brief, we want to know logically how many of those intense brief workouts should we do for best results. And before I give you the answer here in a minute, let me explain 2 items quickly. Number 1, you don't actually grow during the workout. The workout merely serves as a stimulus, a trigger once again. The workout doesn't produce the growth. The body produces the growth during the rest period. I'm emphasizing that distinction for your benefit here. I'm making a distinction between growth stimulation and growth production. The workout merely serves to stimulate growth. The body produces the growth during the rest period. Arthur Jones pointed out brilliantly a number of years ago that the only change that a workout can produce is an injury. If you impose upon your body a training stress or a force greater than its structural integrity can withstand, an injury will be produced immediately. The body produces the growth during the rest period. And it takes more than 5 minutes. It can take some people several days. However, the first thing your body does after the workout is not grow, but recover. When you're done working out, you don't feel the same as you did before the workout, do you? No, you're exhausted. Something was used up. The first thing the body does after the workout is put back what was used up. Restore, replenish, refurbish, recover, or as I like to say, compensate for the exhaustive effects of the workout. That takes time. It doesn't happen in 5 minutes. It can take several days for some people. Again, just as there are those individuals that don't tolerate high-intensity sunlight stress as well as others, it only stands to reason there are those individuals likewise that don't tolerate high-intensity exercise stress as well as others. It can take some people a couple days, some people 3 days, some people 4 days to recover or compensate for the exhaustive effects. It is only once the body has completed the compensation process that it will then devote its energy and resources to overcompensation, which is growth. The first thing the body does again after the workout is not grow but recover, compensate, put back what was used up, bring the body back to parity, where it was before the workout. That takes time. Only once that has been completed will it then devote its energy and resources to overcompensation, now putting back a little bit more than was there before the workout. That takes time too. It doesn't happen in 5 minutes. Both of these are distinct physiological processes. Both require time to complete. What do you think might happen if you were to exercise before full recovery takes place? Do you see where you'd be short-circuiting the growth process? We have learned through observation that it's always a mistake to train 2 days in a row. That is not enough time between workouts to allow for compensation and overcompensation. Most of my clients are making great progress training 72 hours, some even less. I've got some people in different parts of the country. I've got a few guys back in Maryland who are training once every 7 days and literally reporting the greatest progress of their lives. They're doing the whole body only twice a month. Now you see, a lot of people are incredulous because their thinking has become perverted by reading the muscle magazines. Discard everything you thought you knew. Muscle magazines are not sacred scripture. They're not even science journals. Something I learned, and I'm still learning, is to be radical in terms of what I accept as truth. Muscle magazines, in fact, are popular organs aimed at the common, non-discriminating mind. Is that not true? You better believe that's a perfect statement of what a muscle magazine. A popular organ aimed at the common, non-discriminating mind. People who accept blindly, uncritically, whatever written material is offered to them. There is a right way to do this, and I just explained the whole theory to you except for a formal statement of the third and final principle, which I'll give you right now. In order to be productive, intense exercise must be not only brief, but also infrequent. In succinct form, the theory is this. In order to be productive, exercise must, number 1, be intense, number 2, be brief, number 3, be infrequent. Intense, brief, infrequent, IBI. If you want to just plug that into your memory bank there in simple form so you can pull it back later and review it. Intense, brief, and infrequent, IBI. In order to be productive, exercise must be intense, brief, and infrequent. If you're not making bodybuilding progress, in other words, you're violating 1, 2, or all 3 of those principles. That's the only possibility. There's no other possibility. Because the theory is valid. The principles pertain to what's going on in reality. If you're not making progress, either you're not training intensely enough, number 2, you're not training briefly enough, or number 3, you're not training infrequently enough. Or most bodybuilders commit all 3 errors. They don't train hard enough, they do too many sets, and they work out too often. Now, let me give you a training program. You're going to train every 72 hours. You find that impossible, or you're so addicted to the gym, then don't train any more frequently than every 48 hours. Every third day. You would start on a Monday. Take Tuesday and Wednesday off, train Thursday. Take Friday and Saturday off, train Sunday. The next week you would not work out on Monday, by the way. You would take Monday and Tuesday off, train Wednesday. Every 72 hours. Now, on Monday you're going to work your chest first. For your chest, you start out with a set of flat bench dumbbell flies or pec deck. You have an option there. Followed immediately by a set of close grip inclines, preferably on some kind of a guided mechanism like a Smith machine. When I say close, I mean slightly closer than shoulder width. What should be wide are not your hands, but your elbows. Your elbows should be flared back away from your torso towards your ears. Take your arm and place them out in front of you as in a wide grip bench press position. Now, without moving them, try to flex your pecs. Now, move your arms towards a close grip position, and without moving them, try to flex your pecs. Where do you get a better contraction? Closer. Also, with a guided mechanism, none of your effort or focus is diverted into coordinating and balancing the weight. All of your effort goes into moving the resistance and achieving a high-intensity contraction. In a more technical, deeper scientific sense, high-intensity training is really about high-intensity muscular contractions, i.e., the harder, the more intensely that a muscle is made to contract, the greater the growth stimulation. After that chest workout, you can take a brief rest, move on, and do your back. You start out with a set of close grip, palms up, pull downs, followed by a brief rest. There is no superset here. There's no superset unless I specify. Take a brief rest after the close grip, palms up, pull downs. Do a set of either bent over barbell rows. If that bothers your lower back, then use some kind of a seated machine row or one-arm dumbbell rows. Followed by a brief rest and a set of shrugs, preferably on one of those universal type bench press machines where you can stand in the middle of the two handles. If you don't have one of those, use dumbbells. If you don't have heavy enough dumbbells, use a barbell. That's your first day's workout. Only 5 sets total. Is that enough, you might be wondering? Well, you won't know until the next time you do that workout. How do we evaluate progress? In terms of strength increases. You will be stronger on your next workout, I can almost guarantee you with 100% certainty. You take Tuesday and Wednesday off, and on Thursday you do your shoulders and arms. For your shoulders, you do a set of dumbbell laterals or Nautilus shoulder laterals, which is the best by far without a doubt. If you don't have the Nautilus shoulder lateral, you're probably best off using dumbbells. Yeah, the Nautilus shoulder lateral is very good. But like any other tool, if you don't use it properly, you won't get full benefit. You've got to be very careful there and make sure that you set the seat at the right height. You set your seat on that Nautilus shoulder lateral machine so that when you look over either your left or right shoulder, you see that the center of your shoulder is in line with the center of the Nautilus cam, which will be designated by a red dot or a raised portion on the plastic. And keep your elbows as far back as you can. Write that down a lot. Keep the elbows pulled back, way back. After you do your laterals, you take a brief rest to move on to do your rear delts. For your rear delts, I would suggest if you have one available, you use the pec deck in reverse. Work your rear delts on the pec deck, sitting in there backwards. Now, if you're going to use that pec deck, make sure you put your arms in there properly. The triceps should be on the pads, not the top of the arms or the forearms. That'll work your lateral deltoid again. In other words, you want your arms kind of bent downwards, so your arms are parallel to the ground with your elbows and triceps against the pads. That'll work your rear delt. After that, you take a brief rest, move on and do a set of straight bar. Never do easy curl bar. A set of straight bar barbell curls. Take another brief rest. After the biceps, you move on and do a set of tricep press downs followed by dips. 2%. Okay, that's your second day's workout. Then you take Friday and Saturday off, and on Sunday you do your legs. For your legs, you do a set of leg extensions followed immediately by a set of leg presses, superset fashion. If you have one available, and not many gyms do these days, use the vertical leg press, the one that's straight up and down. Those angled leg presses are newfangled devices, and they actually represent a step backwards in workout efficiency. But most people think if something is new, it has to be better. Then you take a brief rest, move on to do a set of leg curls. Okay, after the leg curls, you take a brief rest, move on to do a set of calf raises, standing calf. Now, I'm going to suggest for the next month or two you don't do any abdominal work for the following reason. This program will at least maintain your existing abdominal condition, even improve it. I have some clients who literally complain after every tricep workout with those press downs they have sore abs. This program is designed to marshal all of your body's energy and resources onto the side of growth and strength increases in your major muscle groups. First of all, weight selection and reps. Select a weight for each exercise that lets you do about 6 to 10 reps in reasonably strict fashion. As you grow stronger and find that you're able to do more than 10 reps, increase the weight by 10 to 20% or any amount you believe necessary so you're back to about 6 to 10 again. And I say about. Of course, there are going to be those workouts where you misjudge. There may be a workout, for instance, when you're doing curls, and by the 8th rep, you clearly recognize you're not going to fail at 10, but maybe 13. That's fine. The intensity is still high. As long as you go to failure, the intensity is maximum, but the forces are lower. High-intensity, low-force exercise can be very productive. Where you're doubtful or you're reluctant, and I know that one, going to go 8 to 12. And as a matter of fact, with leg presses, you can do 10 to 15 for sure. I have several real strong clients who are using the whole weight stack on the Nautilus leg press. They're doing up to 70 reps. That's strong. Not only is it strong, but it's reflective of a tremendously conditioned athlete. I've had a couple of 3 guys do as many as 30 reps on the Nautilus leg extension with the whole stack, then with almost no rest, do the leg press with 510 pounds, which is quite heavy, different kind of a weight stack, for 70 reps. Now perform all of your reps in reasonably strict fashion. Reasonably strict fashion. Don't bounce, jerk, yank, or thrust the weights to get them started or to keep them moving. Lift, hold, and lower under control. Remember, high-intensity training technically is about high-intensity muscular contractions. In other words, the harder that the muscle itself is made to work, the more severe the contraction, the greater the growth stimulation. To go into detail through the whole program and give let me give you, for instance, your chest. You want to be able to go from your flat bench dumbbell flies to your incline presses already knowing that you're warmed up, ready for the incline press. You want your shoulders and triceps warmed up. Start out, before you do that superset, do 1 set of incline presses with a light to moderate weight for 7 reps. Then go do a set of warm-ups with a light to moderate set of dumbbells for the dumbbell flies. That will prepare you. Do 1 set of close grip palms up pull downs with a light to moderate weight. Now, if you're going to do bent over barbell rows, of course your lower back is involved. You might want to do a light warm up for that one. Now, when you do your shoulders, when you do your dumbbell laterals, the first exercise, that will warm up your entire shoulder girdle sufficiently. You won't have to warm up for your rear delts. After your rear delts, you do 1 set of light to moderate curls. And you won't have to warm up for your triceps because your triceps will be warmed up sufficiently from your shoulder work. Your rear delts involve your triceps to a considerable extent. I would warm up on the leg press first. You want to warm up not just your legs, so your hips and lower back. When I first started training people several years ago, I had them all doing forced reps and negatives every set of every workout, and almost nobody was gaining satisfactorily. That's when I came to understand much more clearly just how demanding high-intensity training really is. That the body has a strictly limited recovery ability or adaptive capacity. You've got to be very careful. I used to use the analogy lift. High-intensity heavy-duty exercise is like going out into the intense August sun. I've changed that. It's more like going out into the intense August sun with the sun 5 million miles closer to the Earth. Or even more precise, it's like jumping into a fire. It's a very intense stress. It'll warm you up, but you got to jump right back out. Yeah, now I want you to keep a progress chart. This is very important. Remember, when you're doing this thing right, you'll be getting stronger, if not every set of every exercise, every workout, then damn near. You got to keep an accurate progress chart so that you can monitor your progress and know that you're training properly. In other words, I can't guarantee you 100% that this given training protocol is exactly what you need in terms of volume and frequency. Only if there was a God could he look inside your DNA and say, you've got to train once every 59.5 hours. Any more, any less will compromise your progress. We do know that the theory is universally valid. Every human being requires intense, brief, and infrequent training. What we don't know at the outset for everyone is just how brief or just how infrequent. Okay? Keep a progress chart. Nutrition is actually fairly simple, and I promise you I am not attempting or seeking to oversimplify it even slightly when I say that all you've really got to be concerned with here is in getting a well-balanced diet daily. Just like you learned back in high school health class, and they weren't joking. Follow my reasoning here. A well-balanced diet, by definition, by valid definition, is one that provides your body with all the nutrients that it needs. Now, the important follow-up statement is the human body does not utilize nutrients beyond need. What happens, for instance, when you drink more water than you need? You pee it out. You don't have that same luxury with proteins, fats, and carbs because they contain calories. What happens when you drink or eat more calories than you need? You get fat. Now, here's the important follow-up question. What do you need calories and nutrients for? You need calories and nutrients to maintain your existing physical mass and to provide for growth. But remember, as I said at the outset, muscle growth on a daily basis, even at best, is negligible. In other words, you're not going to gain 5 pounds a week. If you were to gain 1 ounce of muscle a day, you'd actually be doing extraordinarily well. Keep in mind also that muscle is not mostly protein. It is not mostly protein. It's mostly water. Given that fact, why don't the Muscle Magazine people advocate that you drink 10 gallons of water a day? Because they can't sell you water through the mail. Muscle is 72% water. Now, if more is better, remember, that's their one cherished, misguided principle. If more is really better, then why not advocate that people drink 10 gallons of water a day? Because the primary constituent of muscle is water. Because we can get it free out of the spigot. Interesting to note here is most bodybuilders are in fact grossly overnourished. Especially here in America, where the average American is overnourished. The average bodybuilder is literally grossly overnourished. And the average bodybuilder does not make much progress, if any. If an individual is overnourished or even adequately well-nourished and he's not making bodybuilding progress, then do you see that his problem ain't nutrition? If you're overnourished, by definition, you've covered all your nutritional bases. How could you have a problem? If you're overnourished or well-nourished and you ain't growing, then your problem is related to training. In fact, and this is the key point, training is the first requirement. Nutrition is only a secondary consideration. It is only within the context of first having stimulated growth through proper high-intensity training that nutrition then becomes a factor, and then it's quite simple once again. All you've got to do is get a well-balanced diet, which can be obtained by consuming a certain number of portions each day from the 4 basic food groups. Number 1, cereals and grains. Number 2, fruits and vegetables. Number 3, meat, fish, and poultry. Number 4, milk and dairy products. Just like we learned in high school health class, just as you would learn in college if you were to study nutritional science, just as they teach in medical schools. A well-balanced diet, by definition, provides the body with all the nutrients it needs. Nutritional supplements, understand, were devised not by bodybuilding entrepreneurs, but by medical researchers to provide, in fact, supplementation to overcome nutritional deficiencies that exist usually for medical reasons. They were never intended to be used by healthy individuals consuming well-balanced diets because medical and nutritional scientists understand what I just told you. A healthy individual consuming a well-balanced diet, by definition, is getting everything he needs. And the human body does not utilize nutrients beyond need. Although I would suggest for the next 4 to 6 weeks at least, build up your strength and muscle as much as you can. Don't try to gain any more fat, but don't worry about losing it. In other words, start an anabolic process going here. Build your system back up. You'll be getting, by the way, some aerobic effect with this too. It was never ordained or etched in stone that you had to do a Reebok step class or use the Stairmaster to achieve a cardiovascular training effect. In fact, a better cardiovascular training effect can be obtained by using weights than in any other fashion. Because with weights, you're, in addition to exercising the chest muscle, the heart muscle is better exercised when various muscles are being worked as opposed to just one. The skeletal muscles act as peripheral pumps. You're better off exercising your heart pump or muscle by exercising all of the body's peripheral pumps or muscles. This program, I can guarantee with a fair degree of certainty, is going to yield you immediate, significant, and even continuous progress. It's eventually going to slow down, however, for the following reason, and this is one of the most important points. Follow me closely here. As you grow stronger, as you continue to lift progressively heavier weights, the demands also grow progressively greater, until finally the demands reach a critical point. The weights are so heavy, given that training protocol, the demands constitute overtraining. When that happens, of course, you'll stop making progress. If you recognize that as you're getting stronger and lifting progressively heavier weights, the demands are getting greater, then a better bit of advice would be to recognize that all the way through, each week. This week I'm getting stronger. I remember that. Mike Mentzer said the demands are getting greater. That only makes sense. Therefore, I should compensate for that by periodically inserting extra rest days, even training once every 4 days. That way you will forestall, possibly prevent entirely the onset of a plateau.